Hey, hello, hello. I'm so excited to talk to you today about your network being your net worth. And you're listening to this a few days into my recovery after getting two grapefruit size fibroids out of my uterus and basically the removal of my uterus as well. Baby, basically two babies, two small babies coming out of me. And yeah, and what inspired me to put together this episode is, as leading up to the my surgery, I was coordinating, care for myself the week that I was going to be resting and recovering. So as a single parent, the care I received when I can't take care of myself is only as good as the local relationships that I've nurtured and, yeah, the community that I've built around me. And I haven't always been great at that, but I'm feel really fortunate in this moment to have, people stepping in to visit me and yeah, and just keep me connected, right? Not keep me so not happy, like be sitting here on the couch, like lonely. Um, yeah, and also like coming off of the Wealthy Woman Vault 2.0 launch, which, as you know, happened live in the Coachella Valley of California in a villa with 30 other people of influence. It just got me thinking about like it brought up a lot of shit for me, honestly. But it got me to thinking about how the influence that I've created in my business and my businesses has been almost exclusively because of the relationships that I've nurtured over the last 10 years, which are only as strong and robust as the relationship skills that I've developed through healing my relational wounds, right? The developmental trauma, the attachment stuff. And yeah, and going back to the whole like people of influence, like clearly in that space, I wasn't, I don't consider myself a person of influence and well, I do and I don't, right? I certainly don't have the number of followers a lot of the people there have. Yeah, so no, I don't consider myself an influencer at all, even though I do have influence in the world in my own way and, with with certain communities. And I want to have more. I would love to have more influence, and that's basically what I'm working towards. And I recognize also in that I do know a lot of people and a lot of people know who I am, and I really appreciate all of those connections and how they've supported me in my business. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to dedicate a whole episode on how I've built my network and as a result, my net worth and how I'm building that. I'm just continuing to build that. And I also wanted to sort of talk about like how to reach out to people who are further along than you, right? Because, you know, expanding your reach can be you do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. And so I just wanted to speak a little bit to that, what to do and what not to do in certain scenarios. And specifically, what sort of fears and barriers I had to overcome in order to enter spaces that I wasn't accustomed to being in. Um, yeah, and so let's just start by just acknowledging that all business is relational. It doesn't matter what type of business you're in. It really is about like your ability to connect with someone that's going to provide people an experience that they're then going to talk about to other people, right? And of course, if they have a bad experience, they're also going to talk about it to other people, which means that your net worth and your network is like, it's dwindling. But but yeah, people work with who they know, like, and trust. And business, I think that, when I was growing up, I clearly understood that it's all about who you know. I remember having this experience when I lived in San Francisco, and I was doing like staffing work, professional staffing work, temp work. And I remember like part of my job was to look over resumes of kids who were coming into this. It was actually a finance business. That's so funny. But there were kids who were, basically submitting their resumes to be interns at this firm. And so I was looking over their resumes, and I just remember having this moment where, like, it was so clear to me that I wasn't at that level. These were people who, like, the reason why they were submitting their resumes because they knew somebody who worked there. They were leveraging those relationships, and that's how they were getting their foot in the door because this was a very, like, prestigious firm. And it was really clear to me at that moment, like, oh, yeah, it is all about who you know, and feeling very like on the outside of that, feeling very like less than, seeing like all of the internships these kids had already had, um, the schools they went to, all of the stuff. So it was quite a shock, like it was quite a revelation. And then I had another experience sometime later where I had one of my professors at the University of Chicago you know, offered to help to put in a word for like put in a good word for me. And he said, "Yeah, like, do you want me to talk to this particular professor that you want to work with at the university that you're applying to?" And I was like, I was horrified. I was like, "Oh, like I can do it myself, like how dare you think that like I need your help getting in there?" And I didn't realize it at the time. It's just like, yeah, that's how people do things. People, it's like it's all relational. And in at that time in my life, obviously I was in my 20s, This is pre any self-work. But I just like I didn't understand that that's how the world worked, that it was all relational, that I was kind of like the, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality. So getting help, receiving help was like a weakness that like, oh, you needed someone to like lift you up because you couldn't do it yourself. So I was so wrong, so wrong. Um, but anyway, yes, it's about who you know, and more importantly, this is important how you make people feel, how people feel in your presence. Um, you know, people people know, like, and trust people that make them feel safe. Like when they feel safe in your presence, you know, yeah, that just puts their nervous systems at ease. They feel like they can be themselves. Maybe they open up to you in a particular way, right? And that builds intimacy. There's more connection when people are able to open up and be vulnerable. That's like scientific data. Um, and people feel safe in your presence when you're not somehow manipulating your energy in order to be liked, because people feel that and it feels iffy. It it just sometimes gives people the ick because you're like, ah, you're trying too hard. Like, don't do that. Um, and this is where self-knowledge and self-acceptance is really the game changer, because if you are aware of your insecurities, right? If you're clear on like, yep, this is my baggage, then you can work with those parts of yourself, and you can, care for those parts of yourself when they're feeling scared, and you can create that inner safety that's going to transmit as confidence, right? It's that self-acceptance and that like, yep, this is just what it is, that communicates confidence. And confidence is so incredibly magnetic, right? Who doesn't love that? Who doesn't want more of that? So when you feel safe within yourself, it inspires safety in your relationships. This is really like your best marketing strategy, folks. Like, not just making your clients feel safe, but everybody that you come in connection with, even if it's someone that maybe you don't like so much, just, or somebody you have to set boundaries with, doing it in a way that is in integrity with your heart, right? That is still in alignment with the person who you want to be, and how you want to be treated. So again, I'm gonna step back in time for a moment, and I want to sort of preface the next section by saying that, I was a therapist for 15 years before becoming an entrepreneur. And, you know, in that work, you just develop the skills to connect with people. It's just like to connect with people emotionally, specifically. That's just my jam. It's always been my jam. It's what I've been good at naturally. And I just made it my profession. But even though I was good at it professionally, I was not always good at it like more personally and more intimately, because when you're in the position of therapist or coach or whatever you want to call yourself, helper, healer, you're in a position of power. You're not necessarily disclosing parts of yourself. You are not necessarily being vulnerable. It is your client that is being vulnerable. So that's kind of kept me in a very safe and protected place. And so, you know, my stuff, my relational, I guess, wounding came out more in my personal relationships. And I have like, I have hangups, I have insecurities, and I've just learned how to identify them and how to work with them, which then gave me like the confidence and courage to sustain relationships over a longer period of time and to be able to work through conflicts and yeah, really, really important stuff. And before working on my relational trauma, I kept my emotions to myself. I didn't feel safe sharing those with people. I didn't grow up in a family that was emotionally literate. I didn't let people in on my process because I didn't want it meddled with or criticized or judged. And my friends would actually complain that when I was making decisions that involved them in some way, they complained that I didn't let them in on my process and that they felt left out, which was totally valid. I totally see that now. And at the time I was like, why do you need to know? Why can't I just present you with the final package? So I also didn't reach out to people if I was feeling like depressed or in a dark place, or, you know, if, I was having like a, cosmic shitstorm happening inside of me. I didn't reach out to people. I would really like, I would feel paralyzed with fear, like just the thought of picking up a phone and saying like I need to talk to somebody was just terrorizing to me. And that contributed a lot to my feelings of loneliness, which I would then soothe with food, right? It's all connected. Um, I just didn't allow myself to be seen in that level of vulnerability. It was way too scary. And it was scary only because it was unfamiliar. It was not something that I was well practiced in. And if you were my friend, right, if we were close and I had a grievance with you, you would never know it. I would probably either hold my resentment, kind of like take it and put it sort of in my back pocket until it came out sideways in like some future moment, right? Or I would ghost you. In other words, I would withdraw my love and attention until you noticed it and then would reach out to me. Or if I was really pissed, I would cancel you, right? I would just be like, all right, yep, yeah, I'm done with you. Shut the door, right? And done. And it's so hilarious to me now, like all of these games that we play in relationships, because, all we're saying there is just like, I want you to see my pain. I want to connect. But you don't know how. And so you do it in all of these manipulative ways, even though it's not intended to be manipulative. Anyway, I was also very sensitive to rejection, so reaching out to people I didn't know was not easy. Yeah. So when I began my process of, entrepreneurship, my journey, um, and you've probably heard this before, but I committed to a vulnerability posting practice. So, I knew that I needed to work on my visibility because I was so good at hiding. And so my practice was just saying the truth, what was true that day for me. It was just that simple. Whatever was alive for me that day, that's what I would talk about. That's what I would post about. And I would try to make it of service as much as possible to the person who was reading it. And this became a sort of like a vulnerability practice, but it also became like a spiritual practice for me. And it became like a way for me to grow, but also to, yeah, to grow my influence as well and to somehow like have my medicine out in the world, right? Even if not a lot of people would see it, it was really more for me. And yeah, and I really desired to be seen, even though it was super scary. I know that like beneath that fear was that deep desire to be seen. I wanted to be known and not known from a place of I'm famous, right? I did want that for a while and I did some shadow work around that too, but I wanted to be known in my humanity, in my personhood. And I had to practice opening myself up so that people could see me. And let me tell you, writing those posts was not easy. It was so not easy for me. Sometimes they would take me 2 hours, 2 hours at a time. Let me take a drink here. I'm so thirsty. And, they would take me 2 hours. Sometimes I would get so frozen in fear. And it's not like, when I say frozen, I don't want you to think it's like I couldn't move, but I could feel a part of me, just like a part of me that would like clamp up. And sometimes I would feel like a hand around my throat. I would just feel like was just kind of closing up on me. Or I would feel like this when I was trying to have this thought process, or completing just completing a post. I would just feel this curtain coming down over my thoughts, almost like, yep, we're done with that. And it would just kind of cover up, and I wouldn't be able to see the rest of the words that wanted to come through me. Yeah, so it was just a really weird experience that I had to kind of like, it felt very ancestral, and it felt like I was working through some witch wounding, some very heavy duty ancestral stuff that I couldn't name, that wasn't accessible to me, but that, like in terms of the story wise, it wasn't accessible to me, but the sensations really, really were. So I mention all of that because a foundational piece of building relational wealth in your business is allowing yourself to be seen. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people kind of like they miss the mark, um, especially at the beginning of their journey, is that they're hiding. You might be sharing a part of yourself that you think people want to see, that is maybe strategic. It's nothing wrong with being strategic, but um, it just, when people can't feel you, when people don't feel that full authenticity, it doesn't allow them to fully connect. And so part of it is the witch wound, if you want to call it that, but really like at the base of it, at the foundation of it is this fear of exposure. The vulnerability is exposure. It is our feeling of lack of safety. And so we need to create that safety within ourselves, right? You create it within yourself so that you can take the risk, right? Because it is courage. It is the courage to take the risk that over time builds the confidence, right? So it's like the courage, taking the risk, that those are the repetitions. Those are like the muscle reps, in terms of the visibility and getting yourself out there and allowing yourself to be seen, that then builds the confidence muscle. So, yeah, I'm not going to get into the weeds about like the witch wound. I might do that in a future episode. If you want that, let me know. Um, but that's just the foundation of building your network. I was going to say net worth and network. Yeah, that leadership, those leadership skills, that thought leadership, that emotional leadership, that embodied leadership, that's really at the foundation of your business. Really at the foundation. There's really nothing better, more magnetic than that in your marketing. So, when it comes to reaching out to people, when it comes to creating a community of like-minded folks and yeah, building your network, I want to invite you to number one, follow your eros. And what I mean by eros is like follow your attraction, follow your desire. Let your curiosity lead you. Maybe it's intuitive guidance. Maybe you have a download. Um, and like maybe there's somebody that you've been following online that you're, wow, this person is fascinating, or I want to get to know them better, or they would be, they would be great to teach in my container, or I would love to co-create something with them. Whatever it is for you, like reach out to them, let them know what you're downloading, see if it's an energetic match. Um, for example, like I'm thinking everyone that I've interviewed on this podcast has been either somebody that I've known in person through different connections or that I've met online. And mostly it's been somebody like that I've followed for a little while, that I've been intrigued about, and then reached out to and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to talk to me on my podcast about such and such a thing? I think it would be so interesting." Um, yeah, and like for example, like I remember meeting the breweria, my business partner through something I put like, well, first of all, I saw that she was in a similar, we had a similar community in common. And then I saw that she had a group called Sacral Sauce. And I was like, oh, so energy work, right? Sacral energy. And it was about money. And that's when I was doing my money work. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, trauma informed money work? Oh, sign me up, please. Right. So I'm in her community. We're kind of like, she's seeing that I'm engaging and then finally, I think in my Instagram stories, I posted something about doing a liver cleanse. And then she reached out to me over the DMs and was like, "Hey, you want to do a liver cleanse together? You want to like keep each other accountable?" And I was like, "Oh, heck yeah, that sounds like a great idea." So we ended up doing that, and that's when we started like exchanging messages over WhatsApp, and then it led to um, me doing a financial plan with, her partner Claire, my now advisor and mentor, and that's how I came into the business, right? So it's all like those are all like seed plantings that led to this outcome, right? Um, yeah, so there's that follow your arrows. And I have other things to say about that, but it really is about like trusting that, like trusting who you're attracted to, like let yourself be guided by that attraction and name it. It's really, I think it's wouldn't it be wonderful? Like think about it. Think about receiving, like say, having somebody come into your DMs and say, I really love the way you talked about such and such on your last live. And I would really love to interview you for such and such, right? Or talk to you more about this, and I think that's a great way to reach out where the person really feels like you are seeing them and you're reaching out to them from a place of like real appreciation. So the second tip is be assumptive. This is a really important one. So when you're connecting with someone that you don't know, like assume intimacy, assume a level of closeness. One of the biggest barriers for me growing up, because I grew up in a family where respect was about hierarchy, and like elders and things like that, that kind of culture, I always wanted to be respectful and polite. And what that did was just create distance between myself and the other person that I was trying to get to know, like feeling like I was bothering them. That's a wound of like being the annoying child and needing to be like, oh, careful so that you don't bother people. Ooh, okay. And that would keep me sort of in this tiptoey kind of place and keep me away from them. So that would keep us from actually developing a real relationship of being close. And it came up a little bit when I met Leah Ardent, who I'm doing the new money membership slash content cash with. Um, when I saw her online, I was like, OMG, her. Like I was just like stars in my eyes. I was just like instantly smitten. I loved the way she like held her energy, the way like the energy came through her words. Like I was like, I want to be able to do that. I was just like, oh my God. And at some point I let her know, like, I need to work with you. I was like, I don't know how, but I need to work with you. And she was like, yeah, like, I think you and I are going to work together. We just kind of like acknowledged the download. And I ended up entering like her money. It was basically like a money healing, like a 1 year mentorship where she did like somatic clears, and it was very powerful, and there were meditations and all the things. And when I finished working with her, I kind of expected to be like, oh, okay, right? I'm done working with you. You were my mentor. Now you're not. And she kept messaging me, like, kept dropping little pebbling is what it's called, I think, when you send people like either memes or reels or funny stuff that you see online that you think is going the other person's gonna like. And I was like, why is she messaging me? I was like, why are you talking to me? And from a really good place, kind of from the place of like, I was actually kind of confused, like why she wanted to be my friend. I thought she was just being nice to me because I was in her container, but she was actually wanted to be my friend. And I wasn't being assumptive there. So yeah, so that was a lesson for me to like just be assumptive. Let me get another drink of water because I could feel myself almost about to cough. So one thing that I don't like about the assumptive piece, and this is, let's say, the shadow side of being assumptive, is that in relationships is like the cold DM, right? Nobody really likes the cold DM, where somebody comes in and says something that assumes a level of intimacy that has absolutely no foundation. Like no intimacy has been established, no connection has been established before that intimacy is offered. It just actually feels like a boundary violation. And when I've reached out to people cold in their DMs, it's actually been a little bit like, let's say, tepid. It's been warm because I've already liked their posts. I've gotten to know what they're about. Maybe I've been in some of their containers or I've bought a low ticket offer. So I have a sense of who they are and why it would be good for us to meet. In other words, there's a vibe, and versus somebody just DMing you cold without having the foggiest idea who you are or what you do and making huge assumptions, right? That's being assumptive in a really like lack of boundaries kind of way. So there's a huge difference there. And when you reach out to people who are farther along than you, let's say maybe they are more established in their business, they're making more money than you in their business, maybe they have better systems in place, maybe they have more followers, like whatever it happens to be, please do your best not to fawn, please. Because when you're fawning, you're automatically assuming a lower position. You've made yourself less than. You're making them better, and they're not. They're not. They're just human. And the right people don't want to be on that pedestal in relationship to you. They just want to get to know you. They just want to connect with you. They're just as curious and excited as you are to meet. So, so the other part three, let's say number three, is ask to be connected. So you want to leverage relationships to build relationships. Um, Summits are good for that. Um, Getting inside of different teaching containers is good for that, right? So you're using another person's network to build your network, to become more visible. And of course, not from an extractive, like go-getter place, like, oh, I can do this. If I leverage that, then I can get this. You know, be aware of that energy, right? That's part of the shadow work ongoing. Um, but but just think about like, oh yeah, this is how we can support each other. I will speak in your container and I will do it happily for free, and that will give me exposure and it's a win-win, right? Um, and there have been times also where it hasn't been appropriate to be assumptive, especially when I'm, let's say I have a friend who is connected with someone I really want to meet that I'm excited about meeting, and I don't have any prior connection to that person. In other words, like I haven't followed them online. I don't know a lot about who they are, but I know enough that I want to meet them. And they have no idea who I am for sure. And in those cases, I've asked a friend who's connected with that person to let them know about me and to ask if it's okay for me to reach out to them. And then, I might give a reason like, oh yeah, tell them that I'm going to be reaching out to them because I want to invite them on the podcast, or I'm curious to have a conversation with them about such and such, right? This gives that person that I don't know and that I want to get to know a heads up. It gives them an opportunity to say no. And if you are rejection sensitive, this works well because you haven't really stuck your neck out directly. You've leveraged the other person, right? So again, like, don't be extractive. People above money always, but just don't just think about what you're going to get out of it. It's like, I say that with the understanding that it's kind of inevitable that you want something, otherwise you wouldn't be reaching out. But think about how it can be mutually beneficial. Think about like center as much as possible in your business mutuality, reciprocity. Really define for yourself what that means. Be checking yourself that you are in alignment with that, in alignment with the give and take in relationships. And I would say give more than you get. Really make it a goal to give more than you get and trust that it'll come back. Um, when you do that, that's going to be a no-brainer in building your network and ultimately your net worth. Um, and when you're doing the shadow work, when you're committed to ongoing shadow work and to looking at the parts that arise, that the energies where you feel like, yeah, I have that really greedy part that like wants this or wants that, when you're committed to walking in alignment with your values, it's just going to naturally come up. You're just going to notice it. You're going to acknowledge it, and you're going to let it be there. And you're going to acknowledge that, yes, I have a tremendous desire for such and such, and that's why this energy is here, right? So I want to move on to what are some of the things that get in the way of building your network? Obviously, there's the hiding piece. That's a big one. Um, So what's come up in addition to the whole being seen in my vulnerability, is the question of who am I to be here, like in this space, whatever the space is. Maybe it's an actual room where you are in an in-person situation and you're like, oh my God, like I'm the odd person out. Or maybe it's an online community where you're just like, yeah, I don't even know why I'm here, right? Or why was I invited to this? You're wondering kind of like, oh, am I worthy to be here? So that's obviously a worthiness thing or an unworthiness thing. And when that's come up, when I've noticed that come up, I've always said to myself, like, why not? Why can't I be here? Why don't you get to be here? And, thankfully, I've not come up with a good answer. Like when I ask myself that question, I don't come up with a good answer. And in the past, I would have been really good at coming up with a story and found a plausible reason or plausible in my brain why I wasn't good enough to be there. And then I just sort of like took myself out energetically. I sort of canceled myself because I hadn't done that sufficiency work. Um, and so, yes, in the process of like building that internal sufficiency of my own enoughness, it's just so easy to see like, yeah, that's a story, delete, and remove. It's just not true. And then I can be like, okay, so I get to be here. So now what? So now how do you act when you decide that you get to be here? Okay, different different scenario altogether, right? The other thing that's kind of gotten me in trouble, let's say, and that I still sometimes like I notice it come up is my belongingness wound. feeling like I'm on the outside looking in. And it's related to what I just talked about, like the unworthiness of being in a space, whether I get to be here and participate. And this one is sneaky because it can sometimes come through in your messaging. Um, for example, you might write content about people you think are rejecting you, or communities that you think you don't belong to. It might bring up resentment and anger, and you thinking that you don't belong this whole time, and when you actually do, but you don't have that perception, you don't have that point of view because nobody's saying to you, "Hey, so and so, you belong." You're having to figure that out yourself over time, as part of, your healing process in business. So yeah, like it can be kind of a tricky thing, even around like writing content and assuming you don't belong when you actually do. So again, like being assumptive about your belonging, obviously part of the wounding around belongingness is about you feeling like you don't get to belong like on this planet. Can you take up space on this planet? Do you get to be here incarnated on this planet? And doing that, that feels like that's energetic and spiritual work that I've had to do. And as like in my very early wounding, I had this place. I don't feel it now, but I had this place for a long time that was not committed to being fully in this body. I wasn't committed to being fully on this earth. And I was like, I don't really know why the fuck I'm here. I resent being here, and then it would come out a lot around my groups. I'm still not great at groups. Trust me, I'm not great at groups. I can shut down very easily in groups, but I'm working on it. Like when I'm there, I'm aware of it. I'm holding space for that part that's just like, nope. I don't want to be here, or I can't be here, or I don't get to be here. So all of that stuff does still come up, and it's really just a matter of like managing those internal parts and working with them and holding space for them. So yeah, that's it for this episode. So we talked about following your arrows, like going letting yourself be drawn to the people that you want to work with or want to connect with, and let them know that, like be honest about your intention and your desire and like your you know um be assumptive, assume intimacy, assume a level of closeness, and allow yourself to be you have to be open to that instead of like trying to be polite and like, tiptoeing around the person. And leverage relationships to build relationships. Ask to be connected. Like build networks that way, right? Like, you can call it tap rooting or something like that, where you um, access other people through the people that you already know. All right, so I hope this was helpful to you. I really enjoyed recording this. And let me know what resonates with you. I'd love for you to share like what moved for you, what shifted, and specifically how you're going to reach out to someone. I want you to share that in your stories and tag me. I would love to know about that. All right. Love you so much. Bye.